What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to basketball. And more importantly, welcome to the NBA Finals. We made it. We have the Boston Celtics versus the Dallas Mavericks. This is a phenomenal matchup. We've got storylines. We've got star players. We're just going to have some phenomenal basketball being played. So let's start breaking this down. I'm going to be talking about like matchups and who I think is going to win in this video, but I want to give you guys a quick update. I'm going to be pre-recording a bunch of videos for next week because I'll be out of town on a business trip. I have actually been hired by an NBA team. I'm not going to say which one it is to help them out with their like off-season scouting and things like that. So you boys in the business, I guess, again, temporarily. I'm not technically an employee. They're contracting me in, but just wanted to let you guys know I am still in the basketball world, and just know that my videos may not be like completely up to date next week because I'm going to be pre-recording them over the weekend. But anyway, let's talk about the finals. Alrighty, the Boston Celtics and the Dallas Mavericks. Can we just talk about like storylines just like really quick? First thing, like Jason Kidd could win a championship as both a coach and a player as for the Dallas Mavericks, which is really cool. Either like Luka's getting his first chip or the Jays are getting their first chip. That's really exciting. We've got some cool vets like Al Horford, Drew Holiday to root for, right? I mean, on the other end, like Kyrie Irving's going for a second championship with another team where he'd be a star player. That's always a really cool thing. We have the Porzingis and Kyrie Irving playing against their old teams. Like, it's just, there's a lot of cool things going on. As far as like who everybody's rooting for, I would have to imagine that most people are rooting for the Dallas Mavericks. Like, it feels like the whole country outside of like Boston is rooting for the Dallas Mavericks. And I was talking to a buddy about this, and I'll get into like the breakdown and everything in just a second. I just kind of wanted to talk about this. Like, I was talking to my best buddy back home about this, and I was like, you pulling for Dallas? And he was like, yeah, I'm pulling for Dallas. And I was like, why are we pulling for Dallas so hard exactly? And he was like, well, fuck the Celtics or whatever. I was like, but do we like actually dislike anybody on the Celtics? And he was like, no, I guess you're kind of right. Like, I like all these players or whatever. He was like, I think it's just because they're in the Celtics uniform, and I don't want to root for them because of that. I was like, that's totally it, man, because I like all these players a ton. Like, I feel like they're very deserving of being there and everything. It's just something about putting on the Celtics uniform. You just don't even really want to root for them because they have so much success. And here comes the Boston fans being like, we haven't won a championship in forever. Shut up. We don't want to hear it, Boston fans. We don't want to hear it. I'm rooting for Dallas. I'm going to keep it very blunt with you. If I had to put money on this series, I'd probably pick the Celtics, but we'll talk about like picks and everything afterwards. Let's start talking about matchups. The big thing, Kristaps Porzingis. Is he going to be playing? It sounds like it's a little bit iffy if he's going to play in the first game or not, which leads me to believe he's probably going to be playing the rest of the series. So are the Dallas Mavericks able to take advantage of that? But let's just talk about this matchup as if it's actually happening, because the Dallas Mavericks have gone against some stretch bigs before in Chet Holmgren, right? And so you look at those guys as similar type of, or similar architect of players, right? Or archetype of players. And the Dallas Mavericks did just fine against him. Chet didn't like convert a huge amount of the open threes that he had, and so that obviously really helped. He's a lot younger player. Porzingis is a lot more like refined, right, as a veteran player in this league at this point. So how is that going to affect the Dallas Mavericks? Is Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively going to get pulled out of the paint too much? Because they're, like, let's be honest, like, they're not the best perimeter defenders ever. We haven't seen them be asked to, like, ice or switch or do a bunch of crazy things like that up to this point. We saw a little bit of Dallas trying to switch people more so to try and preserve Luka so that he didn't have to be, like, chasing people around screens and everything. And I don't know how much Luka is going to have to like do that in this series. Like, are the Celtics going to force like Luka and Kyrie to chase like Drew Holiday and Derek White around? But like Jaylen Brown just likes to have the ball a lot of times during the game, and rightfully so. I mean, he's been on fire as of late. So I'm just kind of curious to see how the Celtics, who are just definitely the more dynamic team, right? I mean, like, if all four of these guys can initiate offense, and like the Celtics will let them do that, compared to it's two, right? It's two guys that do pretty much everything to start it off offensively for Dallas. So what are they going to do to try and get dynamic and try to switch things up to try to get the Mavericks kind of out of sorts? Otherwise, I think like there's not any weird matchups that are probably going to happen. I think this is pretty straightforward as to how it's going to be. I would imagine Derek White will be on Kyrie and Drew will be on Luka more so, just because Drew's got a little more like old man strength to him to kind of go against Luka. But like, are the Celtics going to go to the blitz that the Minnesota Timberwolves were so haphazardly like wanting to do, right? Is that going to be something they do, or do they say like, hey, we can just switch? Because at the end of the day, switching defense in the NBA is is like the best thing that you can do. That's just the best thing you can do in basketball. If you can just switch everything, defense becomes a lot easier. It becomes a lot more teaching of just keeping a guy in front of you, right? And then making sure you're playing correct shell defense after that. But then does Dallas do something if they start switching where they start to go after Porzingis, right? And then what happens if Porzingis gets into too many of these actions? Can Al Horford switch on things as he comes into the game? Like, those are the things I'm really curious to see. Like, how does Al Horford do it? Does he come out and blitz? Like, I can't imagine you can do that with him. He's just not mobile enough at this point. And the Dallas Mavericks have obviously seen enough blitzing at this point. Derek Lively knows exactly how to read it at this point. Gafford's getting better at it as of like the last game and a half. So he's starting to figure it out too. So, and what I mean by that is them hitting like the short roll and stuff and then being able to read what's going on in front of them. Now, there's just a lot better like defensive players like as individuals throughout the Celtics as compared to Minnesota, who was known for more so for like their team defense and everything. But I'm very curious to see kind of how that all unfolds. Like, I would have to imagine they're just going to come out and switch everything, especially if it's just like a Daniel Gafford screen for Luka Doncic, right? Like, are they just gonna switch that? I'm very curious to see. I would imagine that they're gonna try it and see what happens, but if not, maybe they go back to the blitz, but they don't really have blitzing bigs like Minnesota did. So you guys let me know what kind of defense you think they're gonna come out in here. As for Dallas and their matchups with guys, right? I mean, we've obviously seen Kyrie Irving really step it up defensively. Same with Luka, right? That's been awesome. Like, I think it's going to be a pretty straightforward matchup for them. I'm going to assume, and again, probably Kyrie on Derek White, Luka on Drew Holiday, but otherwise, like Derek Jones Jr., you probably feel pretty solid against with him going against Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown's a really, really good offensive player, but Derek White's a good defensive player. I'm not saying it's a perfect one-to-one comparison by any means, but you don't feel gross about that matchup. PJ Washington on Jason Tatum. I think we're going to probably be asking a lot out of PJ Washington and then subsequently Josh Green when he comes in. Those will probably be the two guys, maybe Derek Jones at points, that try to guard Tatum. It's just going to be, can they force the ball out of Tatum's hands? Because he's a willing passer, right? And so if the right play is available, he's going to make it. And I think that that's probably their best chance of survival, right? Is making sure Tatum just doesn't ever get going. And then rebounding, right, with the centers. Because Porzingis and Al Horford, not the greatest rebounders in the world. And Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, very, very, very good rebounders, right? So, like, what are the Celtics going to do to try to keep these two off the glass? And is there something they can do to keep them off the glass? Because I think that the physicality of Gafford and Lively, and more so just the athleticism against Horford, are going to be enough to warrant some second chance points. And let's be honest, the Dallas Mavericks have the best two players in the series, right? And Luka and Kyrie, most likely. No shade at Jason Tatum at all. These two guys are just the best two players in the series. And so if you can increase the amount of shots that you're going to get against your opponent with these two players, the odds are probably going to be in your favor in a lot of instances. But you look at some of like the offensive keys for both teams, right? And let's start talking about like bench as well. Peyton Pritchard, been very, very effective for them. We presume Al Horford will be on the bench. If Porzingis is out, that's when you're going to start to see like Luke Cornett step back in, because apparently he's good to go now. And he's no longer like a stretch five or anything. He's kind of a run, jump, and dunk five a little more now, which is an interesting transition. Like, is Al Horford going to be able to hit his three-point shots? Because you know Dallas is probably going to challenge him out of that corner to probably let those go. Sam Hauser, he's going to be a gravitational force, making sure that people don't just like lose him. If they do go to a ninth guy at any point, maybe at the end of like court, like a half or something like that. O'Shea Brissett is a guy that we've been seeing a little more recently, who's just been a nice defensive player for them that maybe they throw onto Luka just for like a change of pace for a little bit, someone with a little more size and strength compared to Derek White and Drew Holiday. You look at the bench, obviously, then for Dallas, Derek Lively, been extremely effective for them. Josh Green, who's just been a huge energy guy, is he going to be able to hit some threes? That's going to be the big thing for the Dallas role players, right? Because we know that these two are going to do their thing. They're going up against some elite defensive players, but at the end of the day, offense is just always going to be an easier thing. Let's see how they perform against these guys. Can Derek Jones keep hitting a high volume of three-point shots? Is PJ Washington going to be hitting, right? Because you know that he's pretty much just existing beyond the three-point line at this point. I still would like to see some screens set with him, because if they try to blitz then with like a Drew Holiday, Jason Tatum, I just like the idea of a PJ Washington being able to run it, but that's just me. Maxi Kleber's back in the rotation. He was really good defensively in like those. Did we see him for 2 games? I think we saw him for 2 games. Yeah. We saw some really good perimeter defense out of him again, which is really exciting to see. Can he hit his 3-point shot? And then Jaden Hardy, who's just been giving them like quality offensive minutes whenever he comes in, which I think is important, because if they're not going to play Tim Hardaway Jr., which I find it hard to believe that Tim Hardaway Jr. is just ass right now. Like, that's just never been the case for him throughout his career, but is what it is, I guess. Like, if Jaden Hardy can be a nice little offensive spark for them, just kind of get them going, maybe when more of the Boston's like bench unit is in or something, which, let's be honest, they're never in for that much of the game, but for whatever instance they can, if we can go get a couple buckets out of Hardy, that could be a really valuable thing. I'm sure people will be like asking themselves, is this going to be a series where the Boston Celtics be like, hey, we can't really stop these guys, let's just take everybody else out of the game? I don't think that that's even in the question, that that's the way they're going to go about it. I think that they very well know that the Mavericks will just let these two shoot it every single time if they want to, and they can be extremely effective and very dangerous if they do so. So I don't think that that's how they're going to come out and guard them. It's so interesting to be like the Celtics coach or something, right? Because you have so much like dynamic defense that you can throw out there. And Dallas just has seen a lot of different things through these playoffs, and they've kind of countered each one every single time. So I'm so curious to see how it goes. But at the very least, like as a pick and roll defensive team, if Luka's trying to get into that thing where he just gets by someone, kind of bodies them a little bit, I just have to imagine that guys like Tatum and Brown or like Porzingis are just going to be better at guarding that than the Timberwolves were, just because I think they're smarter individual defenders. I know Minnesota was really good as a group again, but that's what I'm expecting to see. I'm expecting to see the Celtics like figure this out and make it work. But who knows? Maybe just the overall talent is just going to be too much of Luka and Kyrie. I'm genuinely like so curious to see game one. I just want to see what both coaches drop, because I can think of like 5 different offenses and 5 different defenses for both teams to come out and start this in. So I'm very curious to see what they kind of key in on and what they want to roll out with. Like, just I have to see game one so I can start to be like, okay, so this is what they thought of at first, and like this is how the chess game kind of moves from here. If we can take a look at playoff stats just to kind of get a recap of everything, Jason Tatum still not shooting a very good percentage from the 3-point line. I'm a little bit worried as of late that he's been trying to look like Luka a bit too much. I'm not saying that's what's going on in his head, but like that's kind of how he's been playing a bit as of late, where he feels like he has to hit all these really tough shots, and it's just kind of like, But like his defense, his playmaking, his rebounding, all been absolutely elite. He's really, really good at drawing fouls, so that's going to be a big one that the Mavericks have to watch for. But at the end of the day, playing really well. Jaylen Brown, not getting much like playmaking out of him or anything. You know, he's just out there to get buckets, play defense. He's been doing a really, really good job of that. Derek White, still lethal from the 3-point line. Drew Holiday, he's just been making all the right smart plays all the time. I'm really curious to see like him and Kyrie and Luka really like go at it, because I think there's just a lot of smart basketball being played. We'll see with Porzingis. We'll see with Horford, kind of like what their roles are and everything. Peyton Pritchard's just been shooting the shit out of the basketball. I'm not worried about Sam Hauser's percentage or anything like that. He can go nuclear at any single moment. So that's just something to watch out for in that. But obviously the first 5 are where a lot of the minutes are going to go to, with like Peyton Pritchard and Al Horford being the guys that kind of fill in just a little bit more after that. So very, very curious to see. Like I said, if Al Horford's in at center, then we have a really big gap, right? Because then it's like they're gonna have to send 2 people to box out Gafford and Lively, right? And then, you know, what kind of issues can you run into from there? So like that's how important like a Porzingis can be in this series, because the role players know so well what they need to do on the Mavericks that it could just really exploit the overall talent of the Boston Celtics. Looking at Dallas, Luka Doncic has been phenomenal, as you could imagine. The 3-point percentage honestly probably could be better, but he takes a lot of heat check threes, so just take that as you will. Getting about 10 rebounds and 9 assists a game. The turnovers are a little bit high, but when you have the ball that much, it just is what it is. Kyrie Irving's been extremely efficient and really underrated on defense. People probably still don't talk about it enough how good he's been. Same with Luka, so we give a lot of credit to them. We didn't actually get to see too much like of PJ Washington's defense in this series. We saw it a lot more in the OKC series, because they would switch a lot more with him onto Shea and stuff, and I just thought he played really, really well. Let's hope that he can continue to shoot from 3. Derrick Jones Jr. has been lethal from there. If he keeps hitting those corner shots, we'd love to see it, right? I like that he's willing to attack and like keep the offense moving as well. I think that's a really underrated part of what he's been doing. Gafford and Lively, just phenomenal, right? If they can just both keep playing their 24 minutes a game and just do what they do, I think it's going to be really good things. Maxi Kleber, just be a shooter, man. Just be a good shooter. Play some solid defense. If they switch you on to like a Brown or a Tatum, just be physical, don't foul him, things like that. I think that's going to be really interesting to watch. Josh Green, again, if we could knock down a couple more threes, oh my God, you'd be so valuable. But we love the intensity. He always creates like an extra shot or possession or two when he's out there. We'd love to see it. And then Jaden Hardy's just been a nice little offensive like spark plug for them. So I'll be curious to see if they throw Dante Exum out there at all. I don't know if it's completely necessary, just looking at like kind of the people that they have out here. Because here's the thing, right? Like, it's gonna be, as these games get closer, it's mostly gonna become like a 7-man rotation. So I would assume it's mostly Lively and Green that are kind of getting a bulk of the minutes. I know they like Maxi Kleber a lot, so he's probably the next guy after that, and Jaden Hardy will be the first one to lose his minutes. O'Shea Brissett will definitely probably lose a lot of minutes out of here. I think at most he's playing at like the end of halves or stuff. But you know, as the series gets closer and closer and closer, they're just gonna shrink that bench more and more and more, and it's gonna come down to, hey, who can just keep getting buckets for the longest, right? And I mean, Luka and Kyrie are kind of prepared for that. I don't know, man. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys for now. That's kind of just my little pre-series thoughts and everything. I'll be breaking down these games for you guys as they happen. I'm hoping that I'll be back for game 1 of the finals, back from my trip to kind of meet the team and everything and meet some of the other scouts and everything. So you guys just stay patient. Hopefully I'll get that video out to you guys. I'll let you know if it won't be out for whatever reason, but otherwise enjoy all the content I'll be putting out. Thanks so much, y'all. Bye.